the messages that you were privy of seeing, did the complainant at any stage use the pervy eyes emoji?
No, she did not.
Did she at any stage use the red heart emoji?
No, she did not, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I think that concludes my questioning of this witness.
Hey guys, welcome to the channel. This is Dr. Takrit, the emoji expert. As she was analyzing the emoji communication of Ms. Mengo and the JP Mbenenge during the tribunal, let's listen to her analysis and tell me what you think on the comment section. Do not forget to subscribe, like, and share.
Advocate Patlinda.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few questions, Dr. Takrit. Just to begin with, Doctor, you were questioned initially this morning very extensively on your qualifications, and your qualifications are certainly impressive.
Thank you.
One of the questions that you were asked by the chairperson was whether you had a degree in IT, information technology. I suspect that maybe because there's another expert that I think is coming to give evidence who does have qualifications in IT and not in linguistics. Can you just tell us, do you need a degree in IT in order to interpret emojis?
No, you do not, Chair.
And what makes you particularly qualified to interpret emojis for this tribunal as opposed to someone who has an IT background?
As I established earlier and answered the questions, Chair, it falls directly within my research expertise, based on my qualifications within forensic and legal linguistics, semiotics of law, jury linguistics, and a firm understanding of sociolinguistics.
Okay. But you're not an expert in the area of gender, issues around gender, am I correct?
No, I'm not.
So your interpretation that you provided today, your opinion that you provided for this panel, is really to be understood solely through the lens of forensic linguistics, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I just want to then look at a few of the instances of emojis and the use of emojis that we've heard about today and just clarify a couple of things. So we've talked extensively about the use of laughing emojis, or what you call hysterically laughing, rolling on the floor laughing emojis. I think we all understand which one that means. And you have often described the use of emojis by both parties here, but particularly by the complainant, as being playful. You recall that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I want to just think, in the context of a series of, in fact, let me start with the last. I just want to clarify that just before you finished your evidence for the skippers, you talked about an emoji with a tongue sticking out as being playful. But just to clarify, that is still context dependent. You're not suggesting that it's always playful.
No, that is context specific.
Okay, that's fine. If we then turn to the sequence of laughing emojis, so a sequence of the hysterical laughing emojis that you described as part of the complainant's linguistic footprint, I think.
Fingerprint.
Fingerprint, sorry. And you said that this was something that she used repetitively, she used often. Would I be correct to understand your evidence that sometimes seemingly harmless emojis can be used to try and underplay the seriousness of what a person is actually saying in a message, and that nonetheless the message remains serious? Would that be a fair summary?
In certain instances, yes, where I testified that, and I explained that she was laughing it off.
And what do you mean by laughing it off?
She was trying to change the tone of the conversation, change it into another direction.
So it wasn't that she was agreeing, it was that would it be fair to say that sometimes that sequence of emojis could denote discomfort on the part of the complainant from your reading of the WhatsApp?
There was no thumbs up, and where she used the winking face emoji, that was where you would see agreement.
Okay.
Sorry, if I may just ask this. You're not saying there's a total absence of standardization. You're not saying that.
No, not with every emoji.
Because if there was total absence of standardization, we'll never be able to communicate.
Definitely.
We'll go different directions.
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you.
So to understand it correctly, you have standard meanings, as you've explained today, for each emoji, but then you apply contextual
With certain emojis. That's what we've gone through today, yes.
Well, maybe just explain that to us again. So you have standard understandings for certain emojis, not all emojis. Is that correct?
So that's why I said the specific one and the easiest one would be the banana.
Okay.
Would be the eggplant. Because our specific standard understanding is that it's a fruit, it's a vegetable, but not within this context. So that is your standard function and understanding of that emoji. But then when used within this specific context, the meaning and the interpretation changes, Chair.
And is that where your training in linguistics comes in and being relevant to interpreting emojis, rather than simply looking at a Unicode definition of what emojis mean?
From a point of forensic and legal linguistics, yes. But you have to understand the semiotics of law, because the semiotics chair deals with the understanding of the symbols.
Can you tell, what does that mean? What is
So your emojis, for instance. That's a clear, easy example to say that the semiotics of law is directly relevant to understanding the emojis.
And you've studied that?
I have.
Now, this is a very new field in South Africa. It sounds like it's a new field around the world.
It is. Not around the world, but within the South African context. If you trace the history of forensic linguistics and legal linguistics in particular, you'll look back to about 2015, 2017. So before this, Chair, most of the literature on language and legal processes and analyzing language within text and so forth happened sort of from a language and law perspective. That's what under the banner that was being used. And a lot of the focus was just on legal interpretation within courtrooms and our standard translation issues within courtroom discourse. So then from 2017 onwards, there was a major shift where myself and two other colleagues immersed ourselves as part of this international association, of which I'm a member, and I'm currently hosting that conference now based on expertise. And as the time progressed and with my research and my thesis, my MA I explained earlier, my PhD, everything was located within the discipline of forensic linguistics. So this is why if you look at the literature within the South African perspective, you'll see a major push from us from 2017 onwards where I've been driving the discipline and growing it within South Africa and the African continent more broadly. The semiotics of law is very new as well in South Africa. That only happened a little bit later. So from 2020 you'll see me writing about semiotics of law because it takes quite a while to familiarize yourself with the international literature, to immerse yourself within the field, publish and so forth. So that would only happen from 2020 onwards, as with the jury linguistics discipline as well.
So how big is the community of people in South Africa that would call themselves, would rightly call themselves, in your view, experts in forensic linguistics?
There are 10 colleagues, including myself, working in the discipline of forensic linguistics. There are 2 colleagues working in the discipline of forensic and legal linguistics. That would be my co-author on that article, Professor Russell Kishila. And then there is only one person, and that's me, working within all 4 disciplines within South Africa.
And are you aware of Dr. Mengo as one of the experts
No.
in this field?
No, Chair.
Okay. Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
assistance. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Madam Sarah.
Thank you, Chief Justice Mina. Dr. Doctorate, please assist me. If I want to be trained to use emojis accurately in a way that conveys a correct meaning that an emoji bears, where do I go to attend that qualification?
You would need to have a master's and a PhD with a focus in forensic and legal linguistics. You would need to register, obviously, to do that. From a point of semiotics of law and jury linguistics, you would need to be part of the international associations, which are fully immersed overseas. We don't have an association within the South African context. And you would need to work under those specific colleagues and researchers in understanding and learning how semiotics of law works and how jury linguistics works, conducting an endless amount of research, specifically within those 2 disciplines, and to publish extensively in order to say that you have the requisite qualifications. But from a point of the basis is to be a forensic and legal linguist. And in order to do that, as I explained earlier, Chair, you would need to come through the stream of either the applied languages or through pure linguistics. And from a legal linguistics perspective, you would also need the LLB qualification.
So what is the plight of us and the rest of the people I know in South Africa who are using emojis every day without having obtained a master's in forensic linguistics and semiotics? Are they getting it all wrong?
It depends on the context, Chair, of how you're using the emojis and what you're sending.
So in light of that answer, it's possible that people who are using emojis day in, day out in our country can send emojis with one meaning, whereas that emoji in fact means another meaning.
Not when you're looking at specific emojis like we established with the banana or with the peach. The standard, or with the eggplant, the standard interpretation, Chair, would be your fruit, your vegetables, as I said. But you wouldn't be sending fruit and vegetables in this text, Chair, because the conversation is not around fruit and vegetables at that time.
Now, in other words, you're saying that with standardized interpretation or meaning, it's not possible.
No, because only some of them are standardized, and in this instance, the standard interpretation of the eggplant, of the peach, and of the banana does not apply within this context and this specific texture.
For me to draw the distinction, I must know which ones are standardized and which ones are not standardized. Now, where do I get that from?
You can Google the emojis and you would immediately see that when you Google the eggplant emoji, the literature will come up, the international literature, to say that the eggplant has sexual connotations used. As I quoted the international literature, it shows that it's being used in a sexualized way.
The problem is that when you are conversing with a person on WhatsApp, you probably have no time to Google each time that the sun rises from the east. I'm saying to you, if one is conversing with another person on WhatsApp, how does he know that I'm now crossing the line from the standardized meaning to the murky waters of unstandardized, non-standardized meaning?
In the instance when the eggplant and the peach emoji were used, Chair, there was a line by the respondent to talk and specifically use the word intimate. And that was followed by the eggplant emoji and the peach emoji. So that was reinforcement, as we established, of that word intimate within that specific context. You would not use the word intimate within that conversation and then talk merely about a fruit and a vegetable that you would consume.
If we take the discussion outside of the eggplant, how do I draw the distinction between non-standardized meaning of the emoji and the standardized meaning?
You'd have to give me an example of which specific emoji you're referring to, Chair.
The laughing, rolling on the floor with laughter.
We established, Chair, that the rolling on the floor laughing emoji was just that, it was laughing it off. And again, it was context specific, because in some instances, the complainant used the laughing face emoji just continuously as an automated response.
In other words, now in the context of the rolling on the floor with laughter, do we have a distinction between one that can be used in a standardized fashion and one that is across the line in the world of non-standardized use?
It would be context specific, Chair.
In other words, there is no discernible line that draws the distinction.
Not with the laughing face emoji, no, because you'd have to look at the specific context.
And in relation to a monkey closing its face? Do you have the line?
We established
Divide.
that within the Japanese context, it's see no evil, to close the eyes. Within other contexts, we've established that it can show shyness, it can show embarrassment, it can show I don't want to look chair.
But is the message not consistent throughout?
No, not if you're using it for the purposes of see no evil.
If it's a see no evil, is it not consistent with the message conveyed by being shy?
No, I would disagree with that, Chair.
Now, in the interpretation that you delve into, with all the emojis that I'll take you through, and given the context in which they were sent and received, is it possible that we can send each other an emoji, A and B, send each other emoji with a common understanding, and then turns out that the common understanding that we are using is not in accordance with the standardized expression?
It would depend on the emoji, yes, so you could have a different understanding, but it goes down to context. The context must be taken into account.
Yes, okay. Let me put it this way. If I have a common understanding with my friend on how we use emoji X, you are not suggesting that your interpretation of that emoji as Dr. Doctor can ever trump our understanding, my understanding of the emoji between my friend and I.
Not if there's a common understanding and there's no dispute between the two of you what the emojis mean. If you both understand it to mean the same thing, no. Because again, I'd be looking at the context of you both saying that you understand the emojis that are being sent between the two of you.
So, in other words,
Sorry to interpret. I think to get clarity on that, what Madam Sela says is this, when he talks about your understanding trumping the one that the parties commonly entertain. Can you look at an exchange of emojis between two people? And then they say to you, Dr. Docret, we use these emojis between ourselves to mean this between ourselves. Can you then say, no, you're talking nonsense. The standard is this, the meaning is this one, because the way you understand it is not standard. You're talking nonsense. That can't be the conversation. Can you trump their common understanding of that emoji?
No, Chair, not where there's a common understanding.
thank you, Chair. So it seems to me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to me that it is important as a starting point to ascribe meaning to an emoji, to understand what the person who used it thought he was using it for. In other words, what he thought it meant. Is it not?
Yes, that's why the context of the text chain is so important.
And similarly, it is important to ascribe meaning to an emoji, to know what the receiver thought it meant. Not so?
The same thing applies, that is correct. That's why you need to look at the specific context and the nature of the conversation.
Then it seems to me then, from that understanding, from what you're saying, throughout the answers that I've to the questions I've asked so far, that context is basically everything.
I agree with that, Chair.
Now, as a starting point of your attempt to interpret emojis here, in this case, did you familiarize yourself with the understanding which Ms. Mengo ascribed to every emoji that you have traversed?
That is based on the text messages, yes. Interpreting the text messages and the emojis within the text messages and the conversation.
You mean, what do you mean the text messages? You mean those that are found in
The ones that, yes,
pages
that's what
1,
I'm
1, 5, 6,
the ones that we went through, that were provided to me.
and any other document?
No.
You did not have sight of what Ms. Mengo's understanding of emojis were as she explained them in evidence before the tribunal?
No.
And if I take you through them, as I shall do, and it turns out that the meaning that you ascribed to the emojis, the various emojis that you dealt with, is different from that ascribed to the emojis by Ms. Mengo, which one will trump?
My understanding of the interpretation of the emojis based on what I've read within the specific context of what has been sent.
I don't know how to understand my question. Let me repeat it. If the emojis that you have interpreted here and gave them a particular meaning are different from the meaning ascribed to them by Ms. Mengo, surely I suggest to you, Mengo's interpretation or meaning attached to the emoji should prevail. Not so?
Above mine as an expert witness.
Surely yes.
I would disagree with that.
Oh. Am I to understand you then to be suggesting that if Mengo believed that he was sending an emoji X to mean Y, and you come to the conclusion that it meant Z, you should be taken as speaking to the meaning of what Mengo meant to convey?
Chair, I would need to be referred to the specific emojis. Because I can't give a blanket answer in response.
Why not? Why not? He says, actually, it's the question that I asked you. I asked you earlier on about who's trumping who. What Advocate Madonsela is asking is this. He say, according to him, Ms. Mengo ascribed certain meaning to some of the emojis that you dealt with. She ascribed to them a different meaning that you are giving them. And then he say, in that event, where Ms. Mengo ascribes a different meaning to yours, which one must override the other? You almost said, and I'm not sure whether that's exactly what you said, you almost said, as an expert, yours must trump Mr. Mengo's.
It would
Yes,
be,
because you are an expert. You almost said that, but I'm not sure that you completed that sentence. So you may have to clarify that. I'll give you that chance.
it would be dependent, Chair, on which specific emojis. So where the emojis were up for interpretation, specifically where it had more than one meaning, then we would need to look at what Ms. Mengo said and what I've said. And then I need to explain the difference of why I think Ms. Mengo would have said that. That would be Ms. Mengo's take, and then it would be my take, which might differ then, my interpretation. But my interpretation is my opinion. It's a subjective opinion, but it's informed by the literature, it's informed by my research expertise, and my understanding of the text messages and the emojis. So Ms. Mengo could have had a different understanding, Chair, of what she sent. And this is why, Chair, I've explained that context is specific, and the intention of the sender and the understanding of the recipient.
Now, if Mrs. Mengo's understanding of emoji is the same as that of the respondent, which is what I asked earlier on, they have a common understanding, is it competent of you as an expert to say, I override your understanding of this emoji?
No, Chair, because if there's a common understanding between them, and they understood what the two of them were sending to each other, and the intention behind that, then there's no dispute.
All right? If Ms. Mengo, according to a particular emoji, conveys a particular meaning to it, and you attach a different meaning to it, can you override her? If you override her because you're an expert, are you then not creating a conversation which is not hers?
If, for example, I hope I'm understanding your question correctly. Please correct me if I'm wrong and I'm misunderstanding it. If Ms. Mengo sends the respondent a specific emoji with a specific understanding from her perspective, and the respondent shares that understanding with Ms. Mengo, then there's a common understanding and there's no need for me as an expert to come and give evidence or interpret that emoji specifically. Where the respondent sends a message to Ms. Mengo, an emoji, or Ms. Mengo sends one to the respondent, and one of them are in disagreement with as to the understanding and the meaning of the interpretation of that emoji, then that's where I would have a role to play to say, this is the specific meaning and understanding from my perspective based on the context, Chair. I hope that I'm understanding the question correctly.
Yes, except that Mr. Madonsela was not yet at the point where he involved the respondent. He's at the stage where he's saying to you, we went through emojis with the complainant in her evidence, and then she attached certain meanings to those emojis. What is your response if her understanding of those emojis is different to yours?
I would say to you, Chair, then I'd need to know the respondent's response. Because if they shared that understanding, then there's no need for me to interpret it. And their understanding of that specific emoji would trump mine. Because they had a common understanding between the two of them.
Mr. Madonsela, I think you can take it further.
Thank you, Chair. So, if I may just hark back to where I was, the subjective understanding of the sender of the message or the creator of the message is important to ascribing a meaning to that emoji, not so?
It is because it speaks to context.
Yes, and then you say you have not had regard to the evidence that was given by Ms. Mengo in this tribunal pertaining to the emojis that she sent.
No, I have not.
To the extent that you have not, are you prepared to accept that where Ms. Mengo has expressed her understanding of what the emoji means, your opinion should not prevail about the meaning of that particular emoji?
I haven't heard either, Chair, what the respondent has to say about the emojis. So that goes back to my point of saying that if there's a dispute because of how the respondent understands that emoji and Ms. Mengo has a different understanding, then obviously my interpretation is relevant. If they have the common understanding, then my interpretation doesn't apply because they've already understood it.
As the Chair has said, I've not reached the respondent's part. I'm just still talking about your understanding of Ms. Mengo's only version. So don't go ahead of me, please. I'm trying to be polite. I don't talk about the respondent yet. I'll come there. I'm just talking about confining it for now to Ms. Mengo.
Chair, I understand what Advocate Madonsela is saying, and he doesn't want me to mention the respondent because he hasn't got there. But I'm sticking to what my version is to say that I have to take into account how the respondent viewed that emoji. So I apologize if I am referring to the respondent and jumping the gun in a sense.
But Doctor, do you have to know and understand the respondent's understanding of what the emoji meant before you can understand what Mr. Mengo meant by that emoji?
No, Chair, because
if Mr. Mengo says to me, by this emoji I convey...
It's Ms. Mengo. You said Mr. Mengo like me. And I don't think she's going to
All right. It's an understandable mistake. If Ms. Mengo says to me, I use this emoji, and to me this emoji means this, it conveys this. And then you look at the same emoji and you say, Bernard, according to me, my name is Bernard. Bernard, according to me, this emoji means this. In relation to that particular emoji, whose interpretation must I take? Mrs. Mengo as the author of that emoji, or you as an expert? You ascribe two different interpretations to the same emoji. She says, to me, this emoji, when I used it, I wanted to convey this, and to me it means this. And then you look at the same emoji and you say, no, I don't agree with that one. So, whose meaning must I take?
Chair, you have to accept Ms. Mengo's version if that's what she intended to send.
Yes, that's what we've been wanting to know all along. Thank you, Mr. Madonse.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Now, an emoji, it seems to me, as you have suggested, is a non-verbal communication of something. And in other situations, and in fact you have testified to this fact, and there's evidence to this effect in this proceeding, that it might express an emotion or a feeling. No, sir?
That is correct, I would agree with that.
Now, in that situation, it expresses a feeling. And Ms. Mengo tells us in these proceedings that by inscribing this emoji, I meant to convey this feeling, this expression. Surely that understanding or that expression by Ms. Mengo should similarly prevail, no, sir?
I would agree with that.
And in circumstances where the feeling that she ascribes to an emoji she used is different to yours, yours cannot prevail, can it?
No, because it's Ms. Mengo's intention and her understanding.
And you have not taken steps before testifying in this tribunal to ascertain what feelings or emotions did Ms. Mengo seek to convey by the emojis she used when she used the emojis referenced in volume 3, as she gave them in evidence during these proceedings. Have you?
No, not her verbal evidence, no. It's purely based on the text that I went through.
And text does not convey feelings, does it?
The emojis convey the feelings and the emotions as a form of non-verbal communication.
And the feelings that they convey are the feelings of the writer,
That is correct.
which you have not had regard to.
I haven't heard oral evidence.
Now, have you had regard, or maybe before I even move on to the respondents, have you had a moment to consult with Ms. Mengo on any of the WhatsApps that she inscribed in volume 3?
Chair, I've had no interaction with the complainant at all.
And do you know the complainant at all?
No, I don't know the complainant at all.
Do you know her cultural background?
I know that she's Isixhosa.
No, she's not Isixhosa.
She's from the Amaxhosa people.
She's Xhosa. Can you speak Xhosa
I can.
fluently?
Yes, I have competencies and
So what? Sorry?
reading, writing, speaking competencies.
Speaking competence. And have you lived amongst the Xhosa people?
No, I have not.
So, your understanding of the Xhosa people is through the language that you studied at varsity or wherever at school.
From school right through university, that is correct.
And you have not lived in the community of the Xhosa people.
No.
No. When you prepared your opinion, did you have regard to any information which was at your disposal that gave you insight on what the respondent attached, to the meaning, what meaning the respondent attached to the emojis that were used in these proceedings in volume 3?
No, I only had sight of the text messages that you referred to. I'm not quite sure in what volume, but that's the only text messages that I was provided with. I had no sight of anything else other than those messages.
You have not had regard to the affidavit deposed to by the respondent? So, can I?
You mustn't feel intimidated by those big bundles of books he's producing now and putting on his desk in front of him.
No, they're not meant for intimidation at all. There is an affidavit that was deposed to by the respondent in these proceedings. You say you have not seen such an affidavit.
The only thing I got, Advocate Madonsela Chair, is the text messages that we went through. I didn't get anything else.
Does it not matter to you as an expert? So, the Chair, I will refer to the respondent's affidavit in due course, and once I lay my hands on it now. does it not matter to you, by process of exclusion, before you express an opinion, to understand what meaning did the respondent attach to the emojis that the complainant sent to her?
I'm uncomfortable about that question, the way you put it. When you say, does it not matter to you, etc., reframe it and say, does it matter to you? It's important to you to have regard to ABC.
Thank you. What I meant, Mr. Dr. Doctorate, is that surely it is important for you, in order to formulate an opinion on the interpretation, to be attached to an image, on an emoji, to understand what the recipient, in this case the respondent, understood the emoji to mean.
As an expert at analyzing the text messages, all I am required to look at and require is a firm data set, Chair. So I explained in the beginning when I was giving evidence that it's important to have a sufficient data set. So i.e. the number of text messages. I cannot just analyze or draw an opinion or interpretation of maybe 5 or 6 emojis as an example, or text messages. I've got to have a full data set.
In order to formulate, when you say data set, what is that?
Data set refers to the text messages. We call it, as part of the analysis, it's a data set. So for instance, if we were looking at the analysis of statements, then if there's 10 statements or 20 statements, that is the data set that I work with. So it's just a term ascribed from a forensic and legal linguistics perspective.
Just to mean a paper on which something is written on.
Yes, so the text messages, that's a data set.
Yes, but then if it means something written on the paper, an affidavit by the respondent is a data set. On my understanding of what you're saying, a data set is it not?
As I said, Chair, all I received was the text messages, and that is sufficient, the data set, in order for me to interpret the emojis within that context, based on that set of text messages that was provided to me.
But let us take it slowly.
Mr. Madonsela, I'm not saying you are confusing the witness. I'm just saying it looks as if you are confusing the witness.